The Galactic Empire had always been known across the stars for its power, its fleets stretching like shadows over countless systems, and its ability to intimidate almost anyone who dared cross its path. Traders, explorers, and even some minor governments feared the Empire because it had a reputation that was hard to ignore. Ships disappeared. Communications went silent. Entire fleets were said to have been wiped out in the blink of an eye. To most, the Empire was a force to respect, a giant that could crush smaller civilizations without hesitation, but not humans. Humans had a very different way of seeing the galaxy. They were curious, resilient, and somehow fearless in ways that other species could not understand. They did not retreat from danger. They studied it, joked about it, or even ignored it entirely. That made them strange and unpredictable in the eyes of the Empire. And this was exactly what the Empire was about to discover. It all began in a trade corridor that connected several rich star systems. The corridor was used by many species to move goods, resources, and people across the galaxy. Usually, when the Empire wanted to assert control, they would send a fleet through the corridor, broadcasting their presence, making their warships visible, and sending threats to any ships that were nearby. Other species, knowing the Empire's reputation, would divert their routes, hide, or comply with whatever the Empire demanded. Fear was the key to control. On this particular day, a fleet of Empire ships moved into the corridor. Massive cruisers, with hulls shining under distant starlight, sailed in perfect formation. Smaller frigates flanked them, ready to strike at the first sign of disobedience. Across the galaxy, sensors picked up the fleet and broadcasted warnings, and the Empire's officers sent messages declaring, in no uncertain terms, that the corridor was now under the Empire's protection, and any ship found ignoring this warning would be destroyed. The entire display was meant to intimidate. Yet, as the messages reached the human ships, nothing changed. A convoy of human cargo vessels, carrying essential supplies from one system to another, continued its journey as if nothing was happening. Inside the bridges of these ships, human crews were going about their usual routines. Some were monitoring systems, some were checking cargo, and some were quietly sipping their coffee, staring out at the endless stars. They were aware of the Empire fleet, yes, but they did not panic. There was no fear, no rushed orders, no anxious murmurs. Only a calm, almost casual attention. It was as if the Empire ships were just another part of the scenery. The Empire had expected trembling, hesitation, maybe even retreat. Other species always reacted that way, but humans did not react. The first warning message came across the comms. This corridor is under Imperial control. Change your course or face destruction. The human captain leaned back in his chair, reading the message, and let out a quiet laugh. Not a nervous laugh, but a full, easy laugh. It echoed softly across the bridge. The crew looked at him, waiting for orders, and he smiled. "No need to move," he said simply. "They're just trying to scare us." A young officer, who had joined the human fleet only recently, frowned. "But Captain, they're the Empire." They could try," the captain interrupted gently. "But we've seen worse. Let them make their show. We'll just keep moving." And that was exactly what they did. The human convoy sailed forward, steady and unafraid. Sensors on the human ships scanned the massive Empire fleet, noting every formation, every weapon array, and every broadcast. Crew members whispered to each other, sometimes pointing out something they found unusual, and sometimes shaking their heads with quiet amusement. Some even took the opportunity to make small jokes about the Empire's flashy display, noting that the cruisers looked more like parade floats than instruments of terror. On the Empire side, officers grew increasingly frustrated. Messages were sent back and forth between ships. Why weren't the humans afraid? Why weren't they surrendering or at least moving aside. This had never happened before. The Empire had faced rebellious worlds, clever smugglers, and even pirates, and fear always worked. But humans were different. They simply did not care about the Empire's threats. They laughed at them. They ignored them. And that baffled everyone in the command centers of the massive cruisers. The human ships were not just ignoring the Empire, they were studying them. Every formation, every signal, every movement of the Imperial fleet was being carefully recorded. The human officers and crew discussed quietly among themselves what the Empire might do next, how their ships worked, and how their tactics could be countered if necessary. The conversation was calm and practical, without any panic. Humans had a long history of facing unknown dangers, from asteroid fields that could tear a ship apart to unknown life forms on distant planets. This was just another situation, and they were handling it as they would any other. The Empire tried to step up their intimidation. The large cruisers moved closer, weapons glowing faintly in the distance, and more threatening messages were sent. "This is your final warning," one broadcast said, voice firm and commanding. "The Empire does not forgive disobedience. Change course now or be destroyed." On the human ships, the message was met with polite silence. The captain of the lead vessel chuckled quietly, shaking his head. "Polite, isn't it?" he remarked. "They think shouting makes them scary." "It doesn't." The crew smiled. They had learned not to overreact to noise and threats. Humans relied on observation and calm decision-making, and they trusted their instincts. For them, the Empire fleet was no different from any other large ships they had encountered. It was impressive, yes, but it did not inspire fear. The humans understood something that many other species did not. Confidence and preparation could outweigh even the most intimidating enemy. Meanwhile, the Empire officers began to whisper among themselves. Reports from scouting drones indicated that humans were not just ignoring the fleet, they were actively recording it, sharing data with other ships, and maintaining perfect formation. It was almost disrespectful, they thought. How could a species treat a threat so lightly? One commander even called for a stronger display, a show of power that would crush any human resistance instantly. The idea was simple: frighten them into submission. But humans did not respond the way anyone expected. Inside the human convoy, the crew had a completely different perspective. They discussed the Empire's show not with fear, but with curiosity. How were the ships powered? How did their communication systems work? Were there weaknesses in the formation? Every detail was noted, every question logged. To humans, this was not a confrontation. It was a chance to learn, to explore, and to see something unusual in action. And in their minds, this was far more exciting than terrifying. Even the younger crew members were watching closely, eyes wide with fascination. They had heard stories of the Empire's cruelty, of how entire planets had been subdued with a single order. But seeing the fleet up close, the humans were more amused than afraid. They noticed the precise movements, the elegant patterns, and the almost theatrical nature of the Imperial display. "It's like a dance," one crew member whispered to another, unable to contain a smile. A very angry dance, but still a dance. The Empire, on the other hand, grew more desperate with each passing minute. Orders were shouted through comms, warnings became sharper, and some ships began repositioning themselves to block the human path. But the humans did not change course. They simply continued their journey, steady and calm, as if the Empire fleet was nothing more than a minor obstacle. It was a small act, but it carried a message that humans were not easily frightened. Their confidence and composure were a silent challenge, a way of saying that they would not bend to threats by the end of that day. The Empire had to acknowledge an uncomfortable truth. Humans were unlike any other species they had encountered. Fear did not control them. Threats did not bend them. And laughter, of all things, was their response to intimidation. For the Empire, it was a lesson in humility. For the humans, it was just another day in the galaxy. Another adventure, another story to tell about how they had faced a force of unimaginable power and kept moving forward without a single tremor of fear. And so, as the stars stretched endlessly around the corridor, the human convoy sailed on, their ships calm, their crew alert but unafraid, and their laughter quietly echoing through the coms. The Empire's grand display of power had failed to intimidate them. The humans had proved once again that courage, confidence, and a touch of humor could turn even the most terrifying fleet into something almost ordinary. That day would be remembered, not for the Empire's attempt at fear, but for the way humans responded, with calm, curiosity, and laughter that could not be silenced. The human convoy had sailed for hours without altering its course. The massive Empire fleet continued to loom in the distance, its warships perfectly aligned in intimidating formations, their weapons glowing faintly under the starlight. Other species in the trade corridor had long since retreated, some fleeing into asteroid fields or hiding behind gas clouds. They had sensed danger and had chosen fear over curiosity. But the humans were different. They moved with calm determination, as if the presence of the Empire was simply another part of their journey. On the bridge of the lead human vessel, crew members went about their tasks with quiet focus. The sensors officer monitored every transmission from the Empire fleet, logging messages and signals for analysis. Occasionally, the officer would glance at the captain and offer a small smile, a subtle acknowledgement that their enemy's attempts at intimidation were failing. The captain, reclining slightly in the command chair, gave a quiet nod in return. There was no panic here, only confidence born of experience. Humans had faced countless dangers in their history, natural disasters on distant colonies, space pirates, even rogue AI ships, and they had learned that fear rarely solved anything. The Empire, however, could not understand this mindset. To their officers, the humans' calm behavior was baffling. They had expected trembling, hesitation, maybe even a desperate plea for mercy. But instead, they received silence, observation, and the occasional human comment that seemed almost casual. Reports from Imperial scouts and sensors confirmed it. The humans were studying them, not running from them. This made the commanding officers increasingly frustrated. Commands were shouted through the fleet, demanding that the humans alter their course. But no response came beyond quiet acknowledgement on the human side. Inside the human ships, the crew exchanged soft laughter and comments about the Empire's theatrics. Some were amazed by the scale of the fleet, noting the sheer size of the cruisers and the elegance of their formations. Others whispered about how the Empire's attempts at intimidation seemed almost ceremonial, more focused on appearance than actual threat. One officer joked quietly, "It's like they've read an old war manual and think it still works." The captain smirked, but remained silent, letting the crew's amusement pass without interruption. Laughter, in this situation, was a subtle form of resistance. It was a human way of showing that fear did not control them. The Empire decided to escalate. Smaller vessels detached from the main fleet, moving in slightly closer to the human convoy, their engines humming with quiet power. Sensors on the human ships picked up the movement, and officers immediately began scanning for weapons range, shield strength, and possible vulnerabilities. While the Empire believed this would provoke panic, the humans simply noted the changes. They recalculated trajectories, checked fuel levels, and quietly adjusted shields and communication arrays. In the calm of their operations, they showed no signs of fear-only readiness. Some of the younger human crew members were initially a little tense. They had been told stories of the Empire, of entire worlds disappearing under their fleets, and the first sight of the massive cruisers had made their hearts beat faster. But they quickly realized something essential. The humans were not like other species. Instead of reacting with terror, they were thinking. They observed. They analyzed. They made practical decisions without letting fear cloud their judgment. Senior officers quietly encouraged them, reminding them that calm minds made better decisions than panicked ones. Over time, the younger crew members joined in the quiet amusement, making small jokes about the Empire's serious faces and their elaborate show of power. Meanwhile, the Empire grew more impatient. Messages demanding compliance became sharper, and their warships shifted into more aggressive formations. Some officers suggested opening fire on a smaller human vessel as a warning, believing that even a single attack would force the humans to retreat. But higher command hesitated. The humans had maintained perfect formation and discipline, making it clear they were not afraid to defend themselves if necessary. Any attack could backfire, embarrassing the Empire further if the humans survived. On the human side, communication remained calm and professional. The captain occasionally sent quiet acknowledgments to the Empire, stating their intent to continue on their route. The tone was polite but firm, leaving no room for misinterpretation. At the same time, sensors continued to record every Imperial movement, creating a detailed database that could be studied later. Crew members quietly compared notes on the Empire fleet, discussing formations, power output, and possible weaknesses. It was as much a learning experience as a journey, and their calm confidence made the Empire's efforts at intimidation look almost theatrical as the hours passed. More human ships in the convoy began to take note of the Empire's broadcasts. The messages were dramatic, almost overly so, declaring in stern tones that the humans were trespassing in Imperial-controlled space. Some ships even recorded these broadcasts for later review. Officers quietly shared snippets among themselves, laughing softly at the grandiosity of the Empire's tone. The humans did not take the threats seriously, but they respected the fact that the Empire was a powerful force. The difference lay in perspective. Respect without fear. In one moment, the young sensors officer of the lead vessel whispered to a colleague, "Do you think they know we're not scared?" The colleague shook their head, smiling. "I don't think they've ever met humans like this before. They expect fear, but they won't get it." The captain overheard the exchange and chuckled quietly. "Let them figure it out," he said. "We're just passing through." And that was the simple, unshakable human philosophy that guided them. Focus on what could be controlled, ignore what could not, and never let fear dictate actions. The Empire's attempts at intimidation continued to grow. They displayed more of their weaponry, sending warning beams of energy into empty space to demonstrate their power. Broadcasts became longer and more elaborate, describing in great detail the consequences of disobedience. Every officer in the Empire fleet expected the humans to show signs of panic or retreat at any moment. But still, nothing happened. Humans moved steadily forward, sometimes glancing at the displays with curiosity, sometimes whispering quietly about the Empire's showmanship. The contrast between the humans and other species nearby became obvious. Alien traders and explorers had long since altered their courses, hiding or fleeing in fear. They watched the human convoy with a mixture of confusion and awe. How could they remain calm? How could they sail so confidently past an overwhelming fleet that had frightened so many others? Observing humans in action, it became clear that their resilience was not just physical, but psychological. Fear did not bind them, and threats did not bend them. Inside the human ships, officers continued to monitor the Empire. They discussed the fleet's patterns, noting the way the cruisers moved in formation, how the smaller ships flanked the main vessels, and the energy output of the weapons arrays. There was no panic, no rushed orders, no hasty decisions. Each movement was deliberate, each adjustment calculated. They treated the Empire as a subject to study, not an enemy to fear. This attitude, calm and measured, unnerved the Empire even further. by the middle of the day. It was clear to the humans that the Empire's intimidation campaign had failed. The officers quietly celebrated small victories among themselves, not through loud cheers, but through subtle smiles and nods. The captain made a point of acknowledging the crew's composure. "Well done," he said. "You've handled this perfectly. Keep focused. Keep calm. And remember, laughter is as powerful as any shield." The crew smiled at that, understanding the deeper truth in the words. Humor and confidence had carried them through countless challenges before, and they were doing it again. The Empire, growing increasingly desperate, tried to analyze the human mindset. Reports circulated that humans seemed to thrive under pressure, that threats made them laugh or focus more clearly. To the Imperial officers, it was an alien concept, almost impossible to understand. They had dealt with fear and compliance for centuries, and suddenly they faced a species that did not react as expected. Their frustration grew as humans continued on course, unaffected, and even entertained by the Empire's own displays. Finally, as the day drew toward its end, the humans maintained their calm, steady progress. The stars stretched endlessly around them, and the Empire fleet loomed in the distance, massive and imposing, but strangely ineffective. Inside the convoy, officers continued their work. Crew members quietly observed the enemy, and laughter sometimes rippled softly across the ships. It was a quiet but profound display of human resilience and confidence. Fear had no hold here, and the humans knew it not by the time the night cycle began aboard the human ships. The crew had settled into routine again. Sensors continued to scan, communications were maintained, and course adjustments were made with calm precision. The Empire fleet still hovered nearby, sending occasional warning messages, but the humans simply continued their journey, unshaken and focused. The simple act of moving forward, calmly and confidently, was its own kind of defiance. It showed that humans, when faced with overwhelming power, did not panic. They studied, they prepared, and they moved forward with quiet confidence. And so, the Empire had grown restless. Hours of observing the human convoy and seeing no reaction had caused confusion, frustration, and disbelief. Their officers had sent repeated messages, each one more severe than the last. Threats, warnings, even boasts about the Empire's strength filled the communications channels. The warships moved closer in precise formations, their weapons glowing faintly, ready for any sign of disobedience. But still, the humans moved steadily forward, as if the Empire fleet was nothing more than a line of stars. On the bridge of the lead human ship, the crew watched the approaching Imperial vessels with calm attention. Sensors displayed every movement, every slight adjustment of the enemy's formation. The captain leaned back slightly, his hands resting lightly on the control console. "They're getting nervous," he said quietly, almost to himself. The officers exchanged glances, noticing a faint smile on the captain's face. They too felt a mix of fascination and quiet amusement. Humans were not reacting with panic. Instead, they observed, analyzed, and remained steady. "Captain," a young officer said, pointing to a display, "they're opening weapon bays. The frigates are preparing for action." The captain's eyes followed the sensor readings. "Good," he replied calmly. "Let them prepare. It won't change anything." The humans had faced dangerous situations before. Asteroid storms, rogue pirates, malfunctioning engines in deep space. These were everyday challenges that required careful thinking and steady nerves. Fear might have slowed others down, but humans had learned to rely on observation, intelligence, and teamwork. They understood that reacting hastily to intimidation often caused more problems than it solved. As the Empire fleet moved closer, the humans adjusted their shields and communication arrays, quietly testing their defenses. They were ready if anything escalated, but they had no intention of panicking. The bridge was quiet, except for soft exchanges about tactical observations, a few jokes about the Imperial fleet's dramatic movements, and the occasional comment about how unusual it was for the humans not to be intimidated. "It's like they expect us to tremble," one officer said softly, "but that's not how we work." The captain nodded, approving of the calm reasoning. The Empire, on the other hand, was growing increasingly desperate. Messages became sharper, almost insulting, and their fleet moved into tighter formations. Smaller ships flanked the human convoy, weapons at the ready, attempting to block their path. Imperial officers whispered among themselves, trying to understand why humans were not responding as expected. They had faced rebellious colonies, cunning, smugglers, and even entire fleets that had surrendered under pressure. Nothing had prepared them for humans. Inside the human convoy, officers discussed the Empire's movements with curiosity rather than fear. They analyzed formations, energy outputs, and weapon ranges. Every detail was logged for study, not panic. Some officers even made quiet jokes about how theatrical the Imperial fleet appeared. "It's impressive," one whispered, "but it's all show. Nothing they're doing will scare us." Others nodded in agreement, quietly admiring the scale and precision, while recognizing that intimidation alone did not work on humans. The Empire escalated further. Larger warships shifted positions to appear more threatening, firing warning beams of energy into empty space. Communications now included extended messages, detailing the consequences of disobedience in elaborate, stern tones. The Empire intended to provoke panic, or at least hesitation. They believed that humans, like every other species, would eventually respond to overwhelming force. But the humans remained steady, moving forward, observing, and even quietly laughing at the Empire's overly dramatic warnings. The young censor's officer whispered to a colleague, "Do you think they're aware we're not afraid?" The colleague shook his head, smiling. "I don't think they understand it. They expect fear. We're not giving it to them." The captain overheard, smirked, and said softly, "Let them figure it out. Focus on what matters. Nothing else." In the Empire fleet, commanders began debating strategies. Some suggested a show of firepower, a single strike to make the humans reconsider their path. Others argued against it, noting the humans' composure and perfect formation. Any attack, they feared, could backfire. The humans were disciplined, capable, and unusually resilient. A failed strike would humiliate the Empire and demonstrate a new kind of human courage. Meanwhile, the humans continued to observe. Crew members quietly compared notes on the Empire's formations, their engine outputs, and communication patterns. The bridge buzzed with quiet conversation about the fleet's capabilities, possible weaknesses, and what lessons could be learned. Humor remained a subtle but constant presence, a way to relieve tension and maintain morale. Even the youngest crew members had grown comfortable with the situation, watching carefully but never panicking. Hours passed, and the Empire tried another approach. Smaller ships moved into positions closer to the human convoy, firing warning energy bursts just short of the ships. The humans noticed, recalculated, and quietly adjusted their shields. No one panicked. No one rushed. The captain gave soft guidance, encouraging careful observation and calm decision-making. "Keep steady," he said. "They're testing us. Let's see what they do next." For humans, this was almost exciting. Other species would have fled or hidden, but humans treated the situation as a learning opportunity. They studied formations, measured distances, and discussed what the Empire might try next. Every move of the Imperial fleet became a lesson, and every warning message was treated as information rather than a threat. By mid-cycle, the Empire grew more frustrated. Officers could not comprehend the humans' calm behavior. They had faced rebels, smugglers, and explorers, but humans seemed immune to intimidation. They did not flee, they did not panic, and they certainly did not obey out of fear. The humans moved steadily forward, observing the fleet, learning, and quietly laughing at the overly dramatic warnings. The human captain leaned back and addressed the bridge quietly. They expect us to react. They expect panic. Let's make sure they never get it. Crew members nodded, focusing on their work, checking shields, plotting the next course adjustments, and analyzing the Empire's every move. Calmness, observation, and readiness were their tools, not fear. The Empire, in turn, attempted to understand. Why did the humans not fear them? Why did they laugh, remain calm, and continue on their route as if nothing was happening? Reports circulated among commanders, each more baffled than the last. Discussions became tense, with officers suggesting increasingly aggressive measures. But the humans' steady formation, readiness, and composure made any attack risky. Inside the human convoy, the atmosphere remained calm but alert. Crew members monitored every sensor, made small jokes, and quietly discussed tactical observations. The young officers, who had initially been nervous, had grown confident. They realized that human strength was not in weapons or size alone, but in calm, rational thinking, teamwork, and the courage to face overwhelming odds without panic. As night fell aboard the human ships, the stars stretched endlessly around them, and the Empire fleet loomed close but remained ineffective. The humans moved forward, steady and calm, each action measured, each decision deliberate. Laughter occasionally rippled softly across the ships, not at danger, but at the Empire's theatrical attempts to intimidate them. It was a quiet defiance, a way of saying that humans did not bend to fear. The Empire fleet, despite its massive size and advanced technology, was forced to pause and reconsider. Their threats, their formations, and their weapons displays had failed. The humans had not reacted as expected. They had not fled. They had not begged for mercy. They had observed, analyzed, and continued their journey with quiet confidence. For the human captain, it was a small victory, though not one celebrated loudly. "We've handled them well," he said quietly. "Stay alert, but remain calm. That's our strength." Crew members nodded, understanding the deeper truth. Confidence and calm could be as powerful as any weapon dot. As the hours passed, the Empire fleet began to recognize something important. Humans were different. Their courage was not reckless. It was intelligent and deliberate. They observed, they learned, and they moved forward. Fear did not control them. Humor and calm guided them. And this resilience made the Empire realize that intimidation alone would never bend humans. Inside the human ships, officers continued to quietly log observations and share insights. Every movement of the Empire fleet became data. Every warning message became information. And every laugh, every small joke, every calm gesture was a quiet assertion of human strength. They were not afraid, and that was enough to unsettle their enemy. By the end of the cycle, the human convoy had proven once again that intimidation did not work on them. Calm, observation, humor, and preparation were far more effective than fear. The humans continued their journey, moving forward steadily and confidently, showing the galaxy that courage did not always roar. It often moved quietly, deliberately, and without fear. The human convoy continued to move steadily through the trade corridor, unshaken by the Empire's looming presence. Hours had passed since the first warnings, and the Empire fleet had tried everything from stern messages to intimidating weapon displays. Nothing had worked. The humans were calm, focused, and even quietly amused at the dramatic efforts of their massive opponents. Inside the lead vessel, the captain and crew had settled into a rhythm of observation, careful preparation, and light humor. But the Empire was still unwilling to accept defeat. Their officers grew increasingly tense, sending urgent messages between ships. arguing over strategies and trying to figure out why humans were so unafraid. In their long history of intimidation, nothing had prepared them for a species that simply ignored threats. One commanding officer suggested a show of force, a simulated attack to scare the humans into changing course. Another disagreed, pointing out that humans had maintained perfect formation and composure throughout the day. Any misstep could turn the situation into humiliation for the Empire. It was at this moment that the humans decided to take the next step. They were not going to escalate the situation with weapons, but they recognized the need for clear communication. On the bridge of the lead ship, the captain signaled the communications officer to open a direct channel to the Empire fleet. "Let's see if we can talk this through," the captain said calmly. "No threats, no panic, just clarity." The communications officer nodded and initiated the channel. A few seconds later, a deep, commanding voice filled the bridge, echoing through the ship's speakers. "This is the Galactic Empire. You are in restricted space. Cease your course or face consequences." The captain replied, calm and steady, "We are passing through this corridor on a trade route. We mean no harm and are following standard procedures. We have no intention of disobeying the law, but we will continue on our path." There was silence on the Empire's end. The humans' response was polite, measured, and confident, and yet it carried no fear. The officers on the Empire ships whispered among themselves. How could a species respond with such calm in the face of overwhelming power? The Empire had expected panic, maybe a plea for mercy, but instead, they received a quiet statement of fact. The human captain continued, "We understand your presence here. We respect your authority, but we are also allowed to travel safely through this corridor. We have taken note of your fleet and have maintained full awareness of your movements. We wish no conflict." The calm, measured tone surprised the Empire officers further. They had expected tension, fear, or perhaps defiance. Instead, the humans spoke as if explaining a simple truth. The clarity and honesty of the message were disarming. It carried no arrogance, no disrespect, and no hint of panic. It simply stated the facts and expressed a willingness to cooperate. Meanwhile, the crew of the human ships quietly observed the Empire fleet. Sensors picked up subtle changes in formation, slight shifts in speed, and adjustments in communication patterns. The humans noted every detail, not in fear, but as part of their natural curiosity. "They're nervous," a young officer whispered. "I can see it in the readings. They're trying to figure out how to react to us." The captain smiled slightly. "Let them figure it out. We're not here to fight. We're here to move forward. Observation is our advantage." On the Empire side, officers debated what the humans meant. Some believed this was a clever attempt to manipulate them. Others thought it was arrogance. A few considered the possibility that humans simply did not understand fear in the way other species did. The commanding officers were frustrated, and tensions were high. For the first time in a long while, the Empire faced uncertainty in the presence of a species that did not respond to intimidation. The humans took the opportunity to gather more information. Communications were kept professional and calm, while sensors continued to monitor the fleet. Crew members quietly shared observations, discussing the fleet's strengths and patterns. Occasionally, a joke or humorous comment passed between officers, not to mock the Empire, but to relieve the tension of the long standoff. Humor had always been a subtle but effective tool for humans. It helped them stay calm under pressure, and it helped them think clearly. As the communication continued, a human officer suggested, "Why don't we offer them some reassurance? It might ease the tension." The captain nodded. "Yes, let them know we are not their enemy. Sometimes clarity is stronger than a weapon." The officer initiated a message. "We are not here to challenge your authority. We are simply travelers seeking a safe passage. If there is any concern, we are open to dialogue. Cooperation benefits everyone. On the Empire side, the fleet paused. The message was polite, non-threatening, and cooperative. It was not surrender, but it was not defiance either. It was a statement of intent, a clear offer to communicate rather than escalate. Imperial officers whispered in disbelief. This species, they realized, was willing to interact on its own terms, calmly and confidently. It was a concept few of them could fully grasp. Inside the human convoy, crew members continued to maintain discipline while observing reactions. Sensors picked up subtle changes, ships shifting slightly, weapons powering down just a little, communication signals slowing. The humans were having an effect without firing a single shot. Their calm, deliberate, and professional approach was unsettling the Empire, proving that fear and intimidation did not work on everyone. Hours passed. The Empire fleet remained close, but its movements were slower and more cautious. The humans used the time to analyze patterns, study formations, and discuss how the fleet operated. Officers quietly speculated about weaknesses, but their focus was not on attack. It was on understanding and preparation. The humans' calm composure was both defensive and strategic. They were ready for anything, yet unafraid, which was exactly what unnerved the Empire the most. The captain turned to the bridge crew. They are observing us as much as we observe them. Let's make sure our behavior is consistent, calm, professional, and prepared. They won't find fear here. Only clarity and competence. Crew members nodded, focusing on tasks with renewed determination. Every sensor reading, every adjustment, and every report reinforced the message. Humans were steady and capable. The Empire tried to regain the upper hand. Smaller ships moved slightly closer, adjusting weapons arrays in a show of precision. Broadcasts became more formal, almost ceremonial, warning of consequences for disobedience. But the humans were unaffected. Crew members monitored the movements, calculated trajectories, and quietly adjusted shields. There was no panic, no haste, no rash decisions. Every action was deliberate. The calm and steady response of the humans forced the Empire to reconsider. They had expected fear, retreat, or panic, but instead, they had professionalism, observation, and confidence. One officer whispered, "This is unlike anything we've seen." They do not respond to intimidation. They simply continue. The commanding officer nodded grimly. We cannot force them with threats. We must consider dialogue. And that is exactly what happened. Over the next hours, communication became more extensive, but remained polite and professional. Humans answered questions clearly, acknowledged the Empire's presence, and explained their route. At no point did they sound afraid, nor did they give orders that were disrespectful. Their clarity, cooperation, and calm demeanor gradually diffused the tension. For the first time, the Empire recognized that humans could not be controlled by fear alone. They had to be understood, reasoned with, and respected. This realization was slow but undeniable. The humans' approach calm, confident, observant, and cooperative demonstrated a new form of power, psychological resilience. It was subtle, but it was effective. Inside the human convoy, crew members continued their work, quietly observing and learning. They noted the Empire's reactions, adjusted shields, monitored communications, and shared insights among themselves. Humor remained present, easing tension and keeping the crew focused. The calm, professional, and intelligent handling of the situation reinforced a simple truth. Humans did not rely on fear to survive. They relied on preparation, observation, and the courage to face challenges with clarity. By the end of the cycle, the humans had not only maintained their course, but had established a new kind of understanding. They had communicated calmly, observed carefully, and asserted their presence without aggression. The Empire fleet, massive and imposing as it was, had begun to respect the humans not for their weapons, but for their composure, confidence, and intelligence. The captain looked around the bridge. "We've made our point. No fear, no conflict, just observation and clarity. That's all we need." Crew members nodded, quietly satisfied with their performance. They had faced a massive fleet with calm confidence, had not panicked, and had communicated clearly. It was another example of human resilience, a reminder that courage could be quiet, and strength could be shown without firing a single shot. And as the human convoy continued on its path, steady and unafraid, the Empire fleet watched closely, adjusting, recalculating, and slowly learning a lesson that would not be forgotten. Humans were not intimidated by threats. They were curious, observant, calm, and confident. And in that calm, they had power that no fleet, no weapon, and no threat could easily match. The human convoy had been sailing steadily through the corridor for hours, and the Empire fleet was growing increasingly frustrated. Despite every attempt at intimidation, the humans had remained calm, observant, and composed. Every warning broadcast, every display of power, every shift in formation had been met with quiet professionalism, careful observation, and sometimes a small smile or laugh from the crew. It was this laughter that began to unsettle the Empire officers more than anything else. On the lead human ship, a few junior officers were monitoring communications. They had been recording the Empire's messages all day, and one officer quietly turned to another and whispered, "I think we could make a highlight reel of these warnings. They're almost comical." The other officer stifled a chuckle. "Seriously, the dramatic tone, the long threats. It's like they're reading a script from an old performance." The captain, overhearing this, smiled faintly. "Let them put on the show. The more they try, the more obvious it becomes. Stay focused, but enjoy it. Humor is part of resilience." Soon, the humor spread throughout the human convoy. Officers shared the more over-the-top messages with each other, quietly laughing at the exaggerated threats. One message threatened destruction of the entire convoy if they did not immediately alter course. Another described in great detail the swift and certain punishment awaiting disobedient travelers. To any other species, these messages would have caused panic. To humans, they were almost entertaining. The crew began joking softly, pointing out the Empire's penchant for dramatics. Even the bridge of the lead ship echoed with small bursts of laughter. Did they really say swift and certain punishment again? One officer asked, stifling a laugh. Another replied, "I think they rehearsed it this morning." Very dramatic. The captain simply nodded, approving of the crew's humor. It was not disrespect, but a subtle assertion of confidence. The humans were showing that fear did not control them. Humor was a way to remain calm under pressure. The Empire fleet, monitoring the human convoy, began to notice these reactions. At first, they assumed the humans were just exchanging tactical information. But soon, it became clear. Laughter, smiles, casual remarks. The humans were not scared. They were not panicked. They were amused. Imperial officers could not understand this. How could a species be entertained in the face of overwhelming power? They sent messages demanding compliance. Again, this time with sharper warnings, but the humans' laughter continued quietly in response. On the human ships, officers continued their work while subtly sharing observations about the Empire. Sensors picked up every formation, every weapon adjustment, and every communication attempt. Crew members compared notes, analyzed the fleets, behavior, and quietly speculated about the Empire's reactions. "They're getting frustrated," one officer noted. "I can see it in the sensors. They're expecting panic, and we're not giving it." The captain leaned back and said calmly, Exactly. We're doing nothing wrong, nothing reckless. We're just steady, prepared, and aware. Let them figure it out. The crew understood the deeper meaning. Calmness and observation could be more powerful than weapons, and laughter was part of their strength. The Empire tried another tactic. A few smaller ships moved in closer to the convoy, performing precise maneuvers designed to intimidate. Energy beams fired harmlessly near the human vessels as warnings. The broadcasts became longer, more dramatic, almost ceremonial. They described, in vivid detail, the consequences of disobedience, hoping to provoke fear. But the humans remained calm. Crew members adjusted shields quietly, noted the distances, and continued to observe. Occasionally, someone would comment, "Very theatrical, but still ineffective." Small chuckles followed. The Empire officers were now visibly tense. They had tried intimidation, shows of power, and stern messages. Nothing had worked. The humans were disciplined, professional, and even entertained by the attempts. They did not retreat, they did not panic, and they did not obey out of fear. Their calmness and humor were confounding. One Imperial commander muttered, "They find this amusing. They're not afraid. How is this possible?" Another officer, nervously adjusting controls, replied, "I don't know. They're different." Inside the human convoy, the crew took this as an opportunity. While continuing their journey, they decided to study the Empire's fleet further. Sensors collected detailed readings, communications were monitored and logged, and observations were quietly shared among the officers. Humor continued to be part of the process, easing tension while also highlighting the absurdity of the Empire's over-the-top warnings. "I think they've written a script for this," one officer whispered, laughing softly. Step 1. Intimidating glare. Step 2. Dramatic words. Step 3. Hope they panic. The captain smiled, seeing how morale was maintained. Let them hope. We don't need to react. Stay calm, observe, and keep moving forward. Laughter is a tool. Use it wisely. The crew nodded, understanding that humor, combined with careful observation and preparation, could unsettle even the most powerful adversaries. The Empire fleet's frustration was reaching a peak. Officers began discussing alternative strategies, unsure whether to escalate or attempt dialogue. They had never encountered a species that did not respond to intimidation. Fear had always been their tool. Panic had always been their ally. But with humans, neither worked. They were calm, composed, and sometimes even amused. Their laughter was a silent challenge, a demonstration of confidence that the Empire had never seen before. On the human ships, crew members quietly continued to log the Empire's behavior. They noted the way formations changed, how smaller ships maneuvered, and how the broadcasts evolved. Humor and observation were intertwined. They were learning from the Empire fleet while showing that fear had no control over them. Each laugh, each small joke, and each quiet observation was a demonstration of human resilience. The Empire attempted to regain control by moving their larger warships closer to the convoy, activating more weapon systems, and sending increasingly stern messages. But the humans remained unaffected. Crew members adjusted shields, recalculated trajectories, and continued on course. When the latest broadcast came through, one officer laughed softly and said, "It's like they're giving us a recital of threats. Very dramatic." Others joined in, stifling chuckles as they quietly discussed the fleet's movements. Even the younger officers, who had initially been nervous, had grown comfortable. They realized that human strength was not in intimidation or size, but in calm intelligence, teamwork, and courage. They learned that humor could be a form of strength, helping to maintain focus and morale in tense situations. "We're not scared," one young officer whispered. "We're observing and learning. That's enough." The captain acknowledged this quietly. Exactly. Keep steady. Keep calm. Let them underestimate us. Observation and preparation are our weapons. Humor is part of our shield. Crew members nodded, appreciating the wisdom and staying focused on their tasks. They were not reckless. They were not confrontational. They were simply humans, confident in their abilities, calm under pressure, and quietly resilient. Hours passed. The Empire fleet remained close, adjusting formations, moving smaller ships into flanking positions, and continuing their dramatic broadcasts. But the human convoy continued steadily. Sensors collected data. Communications were logged. Crew members quietly shared insights and observations. Humor continued to ripple softly through the ships, easing tension and demonstrating confidence. Laughter had become a subtle but powerful form of resistance. Imperial officers began to realize that their traditional methods of control were ineffective. Fear, intimidation, and threats had failed. The humans' calm and humor had created a new kind of challenge. One officer muttered, "They're not afraid. They're laughing. We've never seen anything like this." The commanding officer frowned, realizing the truth. The humans' confidence, observation, and calm were undermining the Empire's authority without a single shot being fired. Inside the human convoy, the captain and officers reflected on the situation. They were passing through a corridor controlled by one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy. Yet no one had panicked. No one had made rash decisions, and no one had allowed fear to dictate their actions. Humor had helped maintain morale. Observation had ensured preparedness. Calmness had prevented mistakes. They were not just surviving, they were demonstrating human resilience in the face of overwhelming power dot by the end of the cycle. The human convoy had proven once again that intimidation could not control them. Laughter, calm observation, preparation, and confidence were enough to withstand even the most dramatic attempts at fear. The Empire fleet remained imposing and powerful, but it had begun to understand that humans could not be manipulated in the way other species had been. The humans had shown that strength did not always roar. It could move quietly, deliberately, and without fear, all while maintaining a sense of humor. And as the human convoy continued forward, steady and unafraid, the Empire fleet watched closely, recalculating and reconsidering their strategies. The humans had turned intimidation into a lesson in calm, observation, and resilience. They had laughed at threats, studied their enemy, and maintained composure. It was a quiet but powerful demonstration of the human way, resilient, confident, and unshakable in the face of. The human convoy had been moving steadily through the corridor for what felt like an endless stretch of time. The Empire fleet, massive and imposing, had tried everything: threats, dramatic warnings, shows of power, and aggressive maneuvers. But still, the humans had remained calm, observant, and quietly confident. Even laughter had occasionally rippled through their ships, not in disrespect, but as a subtle declaration of their resilience. By now, the Empire officers were beginning to recognize something they had never seen before. Humans did not respond to fear the way other species did. Inside the lead human ship, the captain leaned back slightly in the command chair, observing the fleet through the sensors and communications displays. Crew members moved quietly, checking shields, monitoring sensors, and discussing the Empire's movements in hushed tones. There was no panic, no rushing, only careful attention and a calm, steady focus. The captain's voice was low but firm. "We've reached the final stretch. Keep calm, keep focused. No sudden moves. Observation and preparation are our allies. Humor, when needed, is our shield." The younger officers, who had been nervous at first, had grown more confident. They exchanged quiet jokes about the Empire's dramatic displays, but each comment was tempered by the awareness that they were passing through a corridor controlled by one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy. Even while laughing softly, they were calculating, observing, and preparing. The combination of humor and professionalism kept the mood light, but the mind sharp as the hours passed. The Empire fleet became more cautious. Their smaller ships maintained distance, flanking the convoy, but avoiding direct engagement. Their larger warships moved slowly, monitoring every human maneuver. Broadcasts continued, warning of the consequences of disobedience, but the humans had learned to treat them as information rather than threats. The tone and content of the Empire's messages had become almost predictable, and the human crew used that predictability to continue analyzing formations, energy outputs, and communication patterns. At one point, a young officer pointed at the sensor display and whispered, "They're adjusting their patterns. They're trying to anticipate what we might do next." Another officer smiled softly. "Let them. We're not giving them anything to fear. Just steady, deliberate movement and observation. That's enough." The captain nodded. "Exactly. Calm is more powerful than panic. Focus is more powerful than fear. Remember that." The Empire, realizing that their intimidation tactics had failed, began to communicate more diplomatically. Messages shifted in tone, emphasizing negotiation rather than threat. The humans noticed this immediately, recording each communication and observing subtle shifts in language and formation. The calm, steady progress of the convoy had forced the Empire to reconsider their approach. They were no longer issuing dramatic threats. They were initiating dialogue. On the bridge of the lead human ship, the captain gave quiet instructions. Respond politely. Maintain composure. Show respect, but be clear about our intentions. We do not provoke, but we do not yield to fear. This is the moment to demonstrate who we are. Crew members followed the instructions carefully, crafting clear, measured responses that expressed respect for the Empire, while asserting their right to safe passage. The human approach worked. The Empire fleet, though massive and powerful, began to relax slightly. Weapons systems were still active, but the tension in formations decreased. Officers whispered among themselves, noting the humans' unshakable composure. Some began to admire the humans' approach, calm, intelligent, observant, and resilient. Others were still uncertain, unused to encountering a species that did not respond to fear or threats. Within the human convoy, the crew continued to use humor strategically. Small jokes and quiet laughter helped maintain morale and relieve tension. It was not frivolous, it was practical. Humor had allowed them to remain focused, to observe without distraction, and to handle the immense pressure of passing through a corridor controlled by the Empire. Every chuckle was a quiet reminder to themselves and a subtle signal to the Empire. Humans were not intimidated. At a critical point, the Empire initiated direct communication with the lead ship. "Your passage is being noted. We have monitored your behavior and assessed your fleet. It appears that your species is unusual. You have shown no fear. You have shown calm, discipline, and resilience. Explain this behavior." The captain responded calmly. "We respect your authority and presence. We have no intention of conflict. We simply move through space with clarity, observation, and preparation. Calm is our strength. Cooperation is our preference. Humor helps maintain morale, but it does not diminish our focus. We move steadily because we are aware, prepared, and confident in our abilities." There was silence from the Empire fleet for a long moment. Then a reply came, more measured, less dramatic. "Your conduct is noted. It is unlike anything we have observed. You have passed through restricted space without panic, aggression, or error. Your species demonstrates a form of strength we have not encountered before." The captain nodded quietly. "Thank you. That is our intention. We mean no harm and seek safe passage. We respect the Empire's presence and have maintained full awareness of your movements. We wish only to proceed peacefully. The humans had done something extraordinary. Without firing a single shot, without responding to threats with anger or aggression, they had earned the recognition of a massive galactic fleet. Their calm, careful observation, combined with humor and professionalism, had turned an intimidating situation into a demonstration of human resilience and intelligence. Crew members quietly discussed the outcome. "We did it," one whispered. "We passed through, and they respect us." No one panicked, no one made mistakes, and we stayed focused. Another officer added, "And we didn't just survive. We showed them a new kind of strength." Calm and clarity can be more powerful than weapons. The captain listened, pleased, but remained quietly focused on the final stretch of the journey. The Empire fleet maintained their distance now, observing, but no longer issuing threats. Their officers continued to monitor every human move, but the tone had shifted. There was recognition, perhaps even respect, for the humans' calm and deliberate approach. For the first time, the Empire realized that intimidation alone could not control a species that relied on preparation, observation, intelligence, and resilience. Inside the human convoy, sensors were still active, shields monitored, and communications open. But the tension had lifted. Crew members shared small smiles and quiet laughter, reflecting on the long hours of the standoff. Humor had helped maintain focus, professionalism had ensured readiness, and calmness had allowed them to pass through the corridor without incident. It was a perfect demonstration of human resilience. The final approach to the corridor exit was in sight. Stars stretched endlessly ahead, and the human convoy moved steadily toward open space. The Empire fleet, massive and imposing, followed for a short distance, observing but no longer attempting intimidation. The humans had turned a potentially dangerous situation into a display of discipline, calm, and quiet power. On the lead ship, the captain gave soft instructions. Final checks. Stay alert, but maintain the same calm. We've done everything right so far. Let's finish this the same way we started, steady, deliberate, and confident. Crew members nodded, performing the last adjustments with care. Sensors were double-checked, shields verified, and communication logs saved. Every detail was accounted for, without haste or panic. As the convoy crossed the final stretch of the corridor, the Empire fleet slowly fell back. Their ships remained nearby, but no longer sought to intimidate. Communications shifted to polite acknowledgement rather than threats. The humans' calm, confident approach had turned the Empire's power display into a moment of recognition. They were dealing with a species unlike any other, one that could not be controlled through fear. Inside the convoy, crew members allowed themselves quiet relief. They had navigated a potentially dangerous corridor, maintained composure throughout, and demonstrated human resilience in action. Laughter continued softly among officers, not from arrogance, but from the release of tension and the recognition of a challenge met successfully. The captain smiled faintly, satisfied with the crew's performance. Finally, the human convoy exited the corridor into open space. The Empire fleet, still nearby, remained respectful, maintaining distance but allowing the humans to continue their journey unimpeded. Communications acknowledged the successful passage, expressing an unusual note of admiration for the humans' calm and disciplined behavior. The crew quietly celebrated, knowing that they had not only survived, but had done so with grace, intelligence, and resilience. The captain addressed the crew one last time before the convoy dispersed into open space. "We have completed the journey with calm, focus, and professionalism. We faced intimidation and threat without panic, and we passed safely. Remember this: clarity, observation, preparation, and calm are as powerful as any weapon. Humor is not weakness, it is a tool. You have all performed admirably." Crew members nodded, feeling a sense of quiet pride in their accomplishment. As the convoy continued, moving into safe space, the humans reflected on the encounter. They had faced a massive, intimidating fleet, and had not only survived, but had demonstrated a new kind of SDR,